Welcome back to another edition of Taking Down Trump and our special series, Decoding Project 2025, where we're going to be doing a very comprehensive look at the Heritage Foundation and Trump administration's blueprint for a second Trump presidency and what we need to do to prevent that from happening. As we continue with the document in the section regarding the Department of Homeland Security, we really begin to get into some especially scary stuff. Not that the other stuff wasn't, but it really gets incredibly dark in an Orwellian way very quickly when we get to DHS. Okay. Now, part of the problem here, just to start off at the top, is the person who wrote this section is a guy named Ken Cuccinelli. Ken Cuccinelli, for those of you who don't know, was the deputy secretary of DHS under Trump. Okay. He is trying to be the secretary of DHS in a second Trump term. He is basically then laying out a blueprint for what he would do if he were the secretary of Homeland Security. Okay. Interesting, a huge part of this is that he wants to restructure and abolish DHS. Partly because he wants to cut a bunch of the parts of it out and privatize them. We're going to talk about that. But then the parts that would remain would effectively be what would amount to an immigration Gestapo. Okay. And that's really not an exaggeration when you hear what they have planned. I don't like engaging in too much hyperbole, but this is a situation in which using that kind of language is called for. We need to call things by their names. And this would be what Cuccinelli wants is to be effectively a, border czar or an immigrant czar, where he would have the fate of millions of people in this country in his hands with very limited oversight or accountability at all. Let's break apart what this would entail. And this probably is going to take more than one of these episodes to get through because there's so much to talk about. First, right off the bat, let's talk about privatization, okay? They want to privatize the TSA, and they want to effectively kill and privatize FEMA, okay? Let's take these in turn. Let's talk about the TSA, the Transportation Safety Administration. The TSA was created in the wake of 9/11, as many of you probably remember. And let's just review what went down that led that to happen, okay? It's obviously very painful to talk about 9/11, but we got to here. What happened that horrible day is there was a breakdown in the security that was done at airports. Prior to 9/11, security at airports was handled by the airlines, and they would subcontract it out to other companies that then were in charge of the security checkpoints at airports. Okay. So there were not government officials looking at your ID. There were not government officials looking at the x-ray machines or making sure that you were taking your computer out of your bag. Or let's be honest, some of the rules are a little bit, they served a purpose at one time. And they've now gotten a little bit silly. Like we're still chucking our, bottled water out at the airport. We're still taking our shoes off. But all of these rules, all of this stuff, it was not being done by the government. It was being done by private companies. And unfortunately, it didn't go well. There was a recognition in this country that we needed to have such an important security mission be undertaken by the federal government. Just like we say that that's true for the military, okay? When it comes to something that's that important and that's for all of us, and especially for our safety, there's a recognition that that's got to be done by the government, that shouldn't be done by some private company that may just be trying to save a buck or make a buck, okay? We decided that it made more sense to have that be a government agency. Privatizing the TSA would jeopardize the safety of millions and millions and millions of Americans every year. It would be an absolute catastrophe. You would be basically inviting a new 9/11. This would be a dream come true for ISIS or for what's left of Al-Qaeda or for Hamas or for Hezbollah, okay? If they find out we're gutting the TSA and privatizing it, you will have terrorist attacks on American planes again and in American airports again. It's going to happen. A number of such incidents dropped off precipitously after 9/11, and planes and the airports have been safer ever since. And Trump and the far-right Republicans want to undo that. Now, why? Why in God's green earth would you want to do that? Why would you want to make people less safe? A, I don't think they care. But B, what do they really want? They want to Kremlinize the government. They want to chop it up into pieces, privatize it, and hand it to an oligarch. I think what's really going on here is that Ken Cuccinelli wants to be the Homeland Security czar for a term, and then he wants to be the one who actually gets to be the CEO and major majority owner of a privatized TSA and or a privatized FEMA so that he can be a billionaire, because that's where the oligarchs came from. It came from Soviet era government agencies and entities, even up to the level of saying, oh, the oil company that was state owned being given away to particular oligarchs, to particular individuals who then were instantly billionaires and beholden for their wealth to the regime, and specifically to Vladimir Putin. That is how the oligarchs came to be. That is what they want to do to this country. And every single one of these people, as soon as you hear anybody in America talking about privatizing some kind of part of the federal government, see the fucking dollar signs in their eyes, okay? Because that's what's there. They want it for themselves. It is not for efficiency. It is not for private enterprise. They don't want to break it up and have competition. They want to keep it a monopoly and stick it in their goddamn pockets. That's what they want to do. So when Ken Cuccinelli tells you that he wants to privatize TSA and privatize much of FEMA, you have to wonder what the hell he's up to. Okay. When Betsy DeVos talks about privatizing huge parts of the education system, and her family run some of the largest for-profit school networks in the country, yeah, maybe you should be suspicious. When Eric Prince talks about privatizing the military, and he has one of the largest mercenary companies in the world, which used to be called Blackwater, it's the thing you probably know at Best Buy, you should be suspicious. That's what these people are doing. They want to carve off parts of the federal government and put it in their own pockets. To that end, they also want to do things like ban unions throughout the Department of Homeland Security, including in TSA. They want to cut and gut FEMA, getting rid of flood insurance, getting rid of grants to states. You're basically going to be telling everybody, especially, let's be real here, parts out west, even in a lot of red states out west that deal with wildfires increasingly, and then pretty much the entire Southeast, okay, which is at this point currently still very red on the political map, okay? But from Texas all the way over to the Carolinas, you're going to be telling that entire part of the country to go to hell, because federal government will no longer be coming to help you when there's a huge hurricane or there's massive flooding. Your house has been destroyed. Your whole community's been destroyed. You had to evacuate. It's going to be up to your state to figure it out, because according to Ken Cuccinelli, the state should be able to handle this on their own. So let's just be really real about what's going to happen here. It's going to hurt some of the very people, millions of the very people that Donald Trump relies upon for his electoral coalition are going to be some of the ones who get hurt the most by some of the actions that you see here being proposed in Project 2025. How is Cuccinelli going to do all of this? This seems like a set of extreme ideas. How he proposes to do it is by making sure that his own, and let's be clear about this, he has himself in mind when he's proposing all of this, that whoever that secretary would be able to be put into place and start implementing all of this without any Senate approval. They say so right in the document, in multiple places, for multiple departments. They're not going to wait to get Senate approval for these cabinet secretaries, even though the Constitution requires it. They're going to just go. They basically are saying they're going to have acting secretaries and deputy secretaries be put into place and begin doing everything, even without the Senate approving the person. And that they want to take the relatively small list of political appointees for a cabinet level office and say, great, now we're going to drastically expand the number of political appointees as opposed to the civil service, as we were talking about last time. They're going to take those political appointees, those hacks, those cronies, those loyalists, and shove them all in to the federal government. They're not about draining the swamp. They're about populating the swamp with their own goddamn alligators. That's what they want. Rather than having civil servants be in there, they want to put their own people in there to start hacking away at the federal government and using it for their own devices, using it for their own profit, using it to hurt people before the Senate can do anything about it. And guess what? It gets worse for what Commandant Cuccinelli would want to do here. There are some other just gems here in this document. He wants his own access to private planes because currently DHS doesn't let the secretary or the top officials use any private planes, private government planes. He wants access to classified records. He wants emergency powers at his sole discretion, not subject to any of the due process of Title VIII, which covers DHS, or the Administrative Procedures Act, which is the big law that actually governs how a lot of government bureaucracy works. And he wants a total rubber stamp from agency counsel. He doesn't want any of the lawyers at DHS to be able to tell him what to do. So effectively, you would centralize all of the power in the hands of whoever that top official is, who, according to their blueprint, will probably not have Senate approval. So this person will just be appointed by Donald Trump and then just get to run amok. Okay. And then what are some of the other things that they're going to do besides like closing huge parts or privatizing huge parts of the government, probably for their own profit? You're going to see here detention without due process. Mass detention, mass deportation. They even put it on their goddamn signs at the Republican National Convention. They're telling us exactly what they plan to do. They're running on their xenophobia and they're running on their complete disregard for the rule of law. What happens right now is that immigrants who have some sort of action that's going to occur with regard to their immigration status, they get a notice in the mail that they are to appear before an immigration judge. Okay, that's usually what kicks off the proceeding. Instead, what Cuccinelli proposes, what Trump is proposing, is that the immigrant get detained first, arrested, put into custody, and then maybe they would actually have some sort of proceeding later. But that part's not actually spelled out. It's just go ahead and detain them first. Don't actually engage in the administrative or quasi-judicial process to determine whether or not they actually might deserve asylum, for example. No. You're just going to round them up off the streets, stick them in a van, send them to a camp someplace in the country, and then maybe, just maybe, they might get to see an immigration judge someday, maybe, because that part is just left out. What's missing from this document is also as important as what's put in. This would allow them a sort of veneer of legality over detaining and probably deporting or just detaining for huge lengths of time indefinitely 12 million people in this country. They basically want a like Guantanamization of the entirety of the immigrant population in this country. They want to throw them all into detention camps. And maybe or not, they will actually be given any kind of legal due process. But it'll just be indefinite detention. Detain them first, due process maybe later, if at all. And in the meantime, they're going to be rotting in some kind of camp. At a different point in his chapter, Cuccinelli proposes that DHS make much larger use of tents in housing migrants. So he's really proposing to not even just put together some sort of, set of camps with buildings, with barracks, with someplace with dormitories, someplace for these folks to sleep. No. He actually wants to create detention camps with tent cities. these would be holding millions and millions and millions of people. That is what he is proposing. Okay. And then you think about it, and you think about what this is going to mean in this country, what it's going to mean for the vast toll of human suffering that is going to occur in this situation. Take what occurred under Trump with the children put in cages, with families being ripped apart, and multiply it by several thousand, many, many orders of magnitude. That is what they are actually proposing to do in this document. It's there, plain as day. And it would be all run by one person. In his dark, dark vision of this, it would be himself, Commandant Cuccinelli, but he would effectively be a border czar in charge of some kind of immigrant Gestapo. That is where we're going to leave off for now, because we're not even done talking about exactly what would happen and the absolute horrors that would ensue if Project 2025 comes to be, because Donald Trump manages to get back into the White House and put somebody like Ken Cuccinelli in charge of the lives and health and safety of millions of people, and also make sure that we're not able to get help after a natural disaster, and make sure that another 9/11 happens. Just small things for America, nothing big. So that was another episode of Decoding Project 2025. It's our special series looking into Donald Trump's Project 2025 and how it would destroy America as we know it. If you like what you're hearing, as always, follow the Taking Down Trump podcast. You'll always get all of our content downloaded to your devices automatically. We'll be doing more of these episodes soon. The main Taking Down Trump podcast drops every Wednesday. And as always, make sure to follow me on Twitter and subscribe to my Substack to be part of the conversation and get the latest analysis and news.